Hi, I'm Roxanne. I'm from Australia and I live in the state of Victoria. It's a great pleasure and honour to be here with you. I'm going to share with you our COVID experience and hopefully leave some thought-provoking questions behind. Being a school nurse is a very significant change for me, but it's been a very refreshing experience. My background is having worked in oncology and haematology, and then I've run my own business. Being fully immersed in policy, process and government regulations has set me up well for working in a school environment. In the summer of 2019 to 2020, Australia saw some of the worst bushfires that the country has ever seen. They extended right the way through the top end of Australia at the Queensland border, down through to New South Wales and into Victoria. Our skies were black for weeks. The smog and the smoke that lingered was quite confronting for those of us who were some distance away from the fires still. The fires were still being battled through January of 2020, with relief finally in about March that year. As Australia grappled with the bushfires and the extraordinary loss of homes, lives, wildlife populations, we had a COVID pandemic landing on the shores of our country. Australians thought that if we shut our borders pretty quickly, we could stop the spread of the virus coming to the country. But as I sit here today, speaking to you, we are currently in our 6th lockdown, the entire state of Victoria and New South Wales. Since January 2020, Victorians have spent more than 200 days in lockdown. Children have not been allowed to attend school for some of this time either. If anyone had said to me in 2019 that the entire nation would be forced to lock down due to a virus, I would have responded with, "What planet do you think you're from?" The reality is that is exactly what has happened, and here we are still wading our way through it. As a school nurse, I know that I am serving as a bridge between the healthcare and education systems in other sectors, as well as a link to the broader community health issues through the students I serve. It's an important role in promoting public health within our schools and larger communities. Keeping up where the public response to COVID crisis has taken much of my time. In fact, COVID policy rules and regulations are changing far quicker than that of the information technology world. At Heathdale, where I work, we have approximately 2,000 students from kindergarten, which is a 4-year-old group, right through to year 12 or 18 years old. And we've also got 350 staff. My role is as a nurse manager for the first aid department. I have a fantastic team that works with me. I've got 1 other nurse and 6 first aiders. We work across the whole school and see up to 70 children a day for all sorts of injuries and emotional upsets. We work with the pastoral care department as well, and we refer children there for ongoing support. When the pandemic started in 2020, it was such an unknown in Australia. We really had to stop and listen to the news and advice we were being given. As a school, we formed a COVID response team that met weekly to determine our next moves for the school environment. We had learnt a lot during that time. We also had to move to an online learning platform, which was a big adjustment for many. One of the biggest shifts in healthcare practice was in the school, actually, was hand hygiene. No longer was hand washing not an option for students. It quickly became the gold standard in schools for prevention of infection. We implemented it into every classroom, toilet block and staff room. I was rather pleased about this. I had seen great benefit to hand washing education in hospitals and kindergartens, with significantly low infection rates and reduced food-related allergies. I was confused about why it was not taught in schools. There was also a huge rush to purchase thermometers because suddenly if you had a temperature, it meant that you had COVID, which we all know has changed. Our learnings from 2020 into 2021 quickly showed us that temperature testing alone is not a valid diagnostic tool for COVID symptom detection in schools. We also know that children can be positive for the virus, but completely asymptomatic and are generally still well. When assessing the sick children for potential COVID here at the school, we look at 3 common clusters of symptoms. We've got a respiratory symptom cluster, which is looking at a cough, sputum production, shortness of breath and fever. We've got the musculoskeletal symptom cluster with muscle and joint pain, headache and fatigue. We've got the digestive symptom cluster with abdominal pains, vomiting and diarrhea. We're not generally always going to see these symptoms in the younger children, but we may see them in the teenagers and young adults. In Australia, particularly in the west, which is where we are at the moment, the terrain is very dry and flat and quite often windy. We've got a lot of dry grasslands, and as a result of that, we have a very high incidence of allergies and hay fever. This introduced another element for us that we needed to consider when assessing children. We were tasked with checking every child that sneezed, coughed, and especially produced some sort of element of sputum. But at the time, the directive from the government was that if that was the case, the children needed to be sent home from school. If we continued to follow this, we would have had half our children at home. So we had to introduce a system of checking allergy symptoms and identifying what was normal for a child and matching it with the abnormal symptoms. For example, if they had their regular hay fever symptoms such as sneezing, watery eyes and a runny nose and nothing else, we'd send them back to class. However, if they had those symptoms plus a temperature, we would then ring the parents and ask them to go home and visit their local doctor. Stepping into 2021 school year, this year in January, not only did my caseload double because I'm the COVID go-to expert person, but we hadn't seen a good majority of the kids in the buildings for at least 7 months. We're dealing with all of their chronic health conditions like diabetes, asthma, allergies, and then on top of that, toss in all of the mental health pieces, the anxiety about walking in the school for the first time, depression because they've been at home without any socialization with their peers, and then you've got the COVID aspect. In August this year, the school had its first confirmed positive case. I had the pleasure, so to speak, of moving the child off campus dressed fully in my PPE. The whole school and associated community had to quarantine for 14 days initially. We estimated that the impact of this one positive case affected up to 10,000 people in our community. Surprisingly, we had not had any further positive cases as a result of the initial case at the school. There were several teams at the school that worked with us, but a very small team was formed, and we worked directly with the Department of Health to provide direction to the school community. Every member had to be tested. We assisted by collecting all the test results from every member of the school community. Within 7 days, we were able to release about 80% of the school from quarantine, and only 20% had to remain in isolation for the 14 days. This did mean, though, that we worked 16 hours a day for approximately 10 days to enable this to happen. We understand that COVID will never go away. We know that we need to live with it, and we know that some children will get it. Maintaining the basic principles of hand hygiene, cough etiquette, social distancing, mask wearing, and adequate room ventilation will help keep the children safe. Vaccinations are not mandatory in schools here yet, but it is recommended for youth above 16 years of age to get the Pfizer vaccine. Currently, we are considering how we will manage students who present with possible symptoms post-vaccination. The role of the first aid team is to support the students and escalate care when they have concerns. They have all been taught how to wear PPE and what signs and symptoms to look for. My role as a nurse is to help educate people so they can make informed decisions based on all the evidence available, that's including pros and cons, and not be persuasive or coercive in my discussions. I need to assess and manage the health needs that present as well on a daily basis. Our greater concern at the moment is the sudden and the latent impact of lockdowns on the mental health. There are increasing numbers of young children presenting in distress, something which has been compounded by feelings of helplessness and isolation. In Australia, the impact of lockdowns on the nation's children and youth is being forecast by mental health professionals, sounding the alarm and calling it a shadow pandemic. My question is, how do we prepare for what is to come? What can we do in schools to get ahead and prepare for the future and help prevent mental health crisis in the young? For a 10-year-old child living in Australia, the COVID-19 pandemic has been happening for about 15% of their life. As COVID refuses to loosen its grip on our country, the mental health crisis being caused by the ongoing lockdowns, particularly among the younger Australians, is growing. This year, my team and I recognised the need for us to increase our skills in the mental health space. For the little time that we have been back at school, we could see the magnitude of the COVID crisis on the children. So we attended a 3-day youth mental health first aid course. This gave us tools and language to use to further help the children navigate their feelings and express their concerns. This is great for the initial contact with the students, but the questions remain: how do we manage this for the future? I think I have more questions than answers. We recognise that it's not any one individual's effort or expectation to keep the children safe, but a responsibility by all within schools to set a good example. As nurses and health experts, it's our role to collaborate and build strategies together across the world to help minimise the impact and prevent, as early as possible, a mental health crisis in children and youth as a result of the COVID pandemic. Well, may we all take from this life experience moments of much joy and happiness in the midst of the crisis. May we as nurses be enthusiastic and have contagious personalities to keep people going in the toughest of times. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for having me, and I do hope to one day visit your very beautiful country.